Minnesota's number one player in the state in 2023. Could he be making his way back home?
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota
Whatever
Golden
turns out,
Gophers.
however it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Today, we're talking about expectations for the Golden Gophers football team in 2024, both from the outside narrative, the outside perspective, where probably the predictions or the expectations are a lot lower, and then for the fan base themselves, which will be much, much higher. So we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about Jaxon Howard, number one player in the state of Minnesota in 2023, committed to LSU officially in the transfer portal. Could he find his way back to Minnesota? Is that realistic? We'll dive in. And then finally, we're going to talk about Gophers hoops and some names to watch in that transfer portal. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube and let me know your thoughts down in the comments below as well. Let me know what you think on Jaxon Howard, if there's names you want me to look at in the portal or anything else connected to Gophers sports. I got you here on the daily, so be sure to hit subscribe, leave a 5-star review wherever you get the podcast. But let's dive right in. First, we're talking about expectations for Minnesota, the Golden Gophers in 2024. Now, when we talk about expectations from the outside view, from the outside media and other fan bases, those expectations for the Gophers are going to be relatively low. You look at how FanDuel opened their win-loss totals for the Big Ten season, and they had the Gophers listed at 4.5 wins. Now, I told you to smash that over, and I think that only shows itself more and more as things become more clearer. I think the Gophers easily get above 4 games, so if you want free money, that's the way to go. But how much more? That's the real question. So overall, like I said, the expectations from the outside view is that the Gophers will probably struggle this year. And a lot of that comes from people assuming Minnesota is going to stink solely based on looking at their record last year, not looking at what they did on the season, not looking how they did over the course of the games, not looking at any of the context, the actual context, the context of the injured defensive players left, right, and sideways on that defense, plus being down to our 5th string running back. They're not looking at that context. They're not looking at the context of having 2 complete collapses in the final 2 minutes of 2 different games, both the Illinois game and the Northwestern game. In the final minutes, the waning seconds, those games should have been locked up, giving the Gophers a minimum of 7 regular season wins as opposed to the 5 they finished with. That's not taking into the context of a quarterback who had the upside and had the hope of this team on his shoulders, but his play style did not end up fitting or panning out here, and the lack of consistency cost Minnesota games. That's not talking about that context. It's also not taking into the context of the many young players being forced into roles that maybe they weren't quite ready for. But all of that being said, that should help this team for next season. Those who understand that context will be intrigued by the amount of young players that will be ready because they have experience under their belts. They'll be intrigued by the number of returning starters coming back on both sides of the ball. The whole offensive line almost is a bunch of starters or players that had started games last year. The wide receiver room has a ton of production coming back. The running back room has a key star coming back. The biggest change on offense is the quarterback and tight end position. Outside of that, you flip it on defense, you still have a ton of returning production on the edge rushers, on the linebackers, on the cornerbacks somewhat. The safeties are really the big change on that defensive line, and then also, or on the defensive end, and then also the interior defensive tackles and whatnot. So overall, there's a good number of players returning with production under their belt. On top of that, people don't just look at the quarterback being an FCS transfer, but rather a guy who pops on the tape and a guy who absolutely put up the production and could translate well. A guy who was rated and graded one of the highest transfer quarterbacks in the entire conference, a top 3 of the 11 quarterbacks transferring into the conference. People are going to forget about Darius Taylor and how special he is, but the people who don't forget know that Minnesota has a star running back when healthy, and that can be deadly for opposing defenses. But many won't remember all of that. They won't remember what makes Minnesota a team that could be a really nice sleeper within the Big Ten Conference, a team that could pull some upsets, a team that could win games that people go, really? They won? I'm telling you right now, the Gophers could be a sleeper team to find some success in the Big Ten Conference in 2024. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win the conference. I'm not saying they're going to go out there and beat Penn State or Michigan or anything like that. But I'm not saying they can't pull an upset. I'm not saying they can't get wins against USC, against their rivals, or anything of the sort. I'm saying this team could surprise many. And so the expectations will be higher for the internal fan base than what the outside has for them. So when you're talking about the internal expectations, I think kind of getting a read of the fan base, everyone is expecting to get back on track. You cannot go below 500, plain and simple. No ifs, no buts. Point blank and period. You have to get above 500 if you're Coach Fleck and crew. Now, on top of that, we've come to know Minnesota getting rivalry wins, mainly in the kind of 50-50 split with Wisconsin since PJ Fleck has gotten here. But now we have Floyd of Rosedale back here in Minnesota as well. So now the expectation is you have to win at least one of your rivalry games. And the hope is that you can get both in the same season. So hopefully that can happen soon, because it has not happened, I believe, since like in the 90s somewhere. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly, but getting at least one of them is pertinent. Then on top of that, expectations from in the fan base, the defense improving and being better than the inconsistency that we saw last year and the collapses late in games that we saw last year. The defense getting back on track, maybe towards that top 25 outlook we were seeing year after year in some occasions for Minnesota with Coach Joe Rossi. So hopefully Coach Heatherman can get them back on track and get them playing maybe more aggressive and in a different style, but getting the defense back into those top 25 territories. I think that is a big expectation from this fan base, is getting the defense at least far and away improved. Another expectation the internal fan base has is better quarterback play, plain and simple. And how much Max Brosmer has been touted, how much we've heard about him from his quarterbacks coaches, how much we've heard about him in the production he's had in FCS, how much we've heard about him in the early practices and in the pro day throwings and what have you. Max Brosmer, we are expecting better consistency. I'm not even saying the gaudy throws. I'm not even saying the amazing wow plays. I'm saying a guy who has leadership, makes the easy plays, makes the layup throws, and runs the offense to a T. I don't care if it looks game manager like at all, as long as he plays consistent, brings efficiency, and brings W's. So I think overall, those are kind of the expectations from the internal fan base. On top of being more competitive in games like North Carolina, which turned out to be more of a blowout in the box score than it felt during the game, even though we couldn't hit the big open explosion plays. I think expectations would be to compete with a USC, to compete with a Maryland. And people might be like, whoa, really? You think it? Yes, I really think that. So overall, I think that Minnesota can be more competitive. They can maybe pull some upsets in games that people don't necessarily have them as anywhere near a favorite if you looked at the schedule today. But I think by the time we get to those games, it wouldn't be too shocking to see them pull some upset games. On top of that, myself, I need to see Coach Fleck beat Coach Bielema. Finally, it needs to happen. It should have happened last year. It should have happened 2 years prior to that. The only 2022, he earned it, plain and simple. But the year before that and last year, absolutely no excuses. Minnesota should have found a way to win those games. So we have to beat Illinois. And then finally, I think most fans expect true bowl game eligibility, not relying on the academic progress rates, and finally also another bowl game win, because Minnesota has been on a streak and they want to keep that streak going. So those are kind of the expectations I see for the Gophers from both the outside perspective and internally. Now, a hope will be the inclusion of more passing, the inclusion of a more balanced offense. That might not be a full expectation, but more so a hope, because we still have rarely seen that in the time of Coach Fleck in the Fleck era. So overall, these expectations might seem a lot higher. They might seem too high to the outside perspectives, but the Minnesota fan base absolutely is going to want that, if not more. Some might say that's not enough. They might say it's not, the bar isn't high enough by me saying that. But overall, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I'm hopeful Minnesota finishes in the top 10 in the Big Ten Conference, which is pertinent for long-term success, but also for recruiting. I think you have to be able to compete and you have to be able to win often. And so this is going to be a big year and a big stepping stone for the Gophers in this new conference. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about a player maybe the Gophers could attack in this portal window coming up on April 15th. And he is from here. He was the number one player in the state. And I think the Gophers could have a chance. We'll dive in coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel, because it is playoff time for the NBA and the NHL. It's the best time of NBA basketball, point blank, period, full swing. And guess what? It is FanDuel's time to get in and bet on every game. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. That's right. You heard it. Guaranteed. You don't have to place any bets or anything well, I guess you kind of have to place a bet, but you don't have to win your bet in order to get that $150 in bonus bets. All you have to do is make a bet. Win or lose, you're getting $150 guaranteed. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and simple to use. So what are you waiting for? Go to fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic dub. That's right. Go to FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, over at fanduel.com/lockedon and take advantage of the $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about Jaxon Howard, the number one player in the state of Minnesota recruit-wise from the class of 2023. Now, he had Minnesota in his final visits. He had Minnesota in the running for his commitment back when he was a high school student, but ultimately he ended up committing to LSU. And I don't know if everybody saw that decision coming. I know some people thought it would be Miami. Some people thought maybe he'd stay home. LSU was in the running. Michigan was up there as well, but I think people kind of thought it was between Miami or Minnesota, and it ended up being the Tigers down there in LSU. Now, he played 5 games as a freshman with LSU, and he flashed in LSU's spring game prior to the season as well with 4 tackles and a sack. So he showed, I can play with the big boys. I can get it done. And that was with an LSU team that had Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, top-notch offensive line, and what have you. So he showed he can play with some top-notch talent. Now, he only, in his limited time, had 2 tackles in the actual games that counted and 1 quarterback hurry as a freshman. And he, like I said, he played in 5 games, but I believe he still maintained his red shirt, because I believe bowl games no longer count towards eligibility cap. So if that is correct, then I believe he still maintained his red shirt and could have 4 years of eligibility. Could be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. Now, he took official visits, like I said, to Minnesota, to Michigan, to Miami, and to LSU, and ultimately LSU ended up winning out. But could he come back home? Could he be like, you know what? It's time for me to return and make a name for myself back home, be in front of family, be in front of friends, and be a part of a legacy in getting Minnesota back on track. Now, yes, NIL could play a factor in what his next decision is, but knowing him, or knowing his pops, knowing his family, knowing that his dad was an NFL guy and a head coach here in Minnesota at the high school level, I know that they're going to be very particular about their next move and making the right choice as a transfer choice. I think it's going to be more of a long-term business decision on getting true playing time, on getting some run and opportunity to build for the NFL, which is the ultimate goal, rather than solely on NIL now. Now, if there's an opportunity to get a win-win and make it a team that you can get some playing time and opportunities now and continue to grow while also getting some NIL, can't go wrong there. But if Minnesota can offer a competitive package on top of playtime and opportunities, I think that's where you can start to get competitive. And then you have maybe some home field advantage with being able to play in front of family and friends. So if they can get him on the field and show that, I think it could be something in favor of Minnesota. Now, when you're talking about Jaxon Howard, you're talking about a kid who's very athletic, played both tight end and defensive end for his high school team. He was the number one kid in the state, like I said, for the class of 2023. And one factor that I think could be an X factor in Minnesota's favor, if they can get him on the phone and get him interested slightly, get him available to listen to their pitch. If that can happen, I think Minnesota, their X factor is none other than Coach Winston DeLattiboudere, and he could be the make or break factor depending on how that relationship builds. Because everything you hear when it comes to Coach Winston is how much his guys love him, how much he gets into the details and the nitty gritty, and they love the energy and the presence and the atmosphere and the way he breaks it down and the way he coaches. But guess what? He wasn't on staff when Jaxon Howard was making his decisions. So that could be the next step. That could be maybe the thing that elevates Minnesota to the forefront, is if they can get on a real conversation and a real, just get Jaxon to have an open ear. I think that Coach Winston could be the X factor. He could be the reason that Minnesota ultimately could end up winning the commitment overall. I think just based on how much people love his coaching, his presence, and his attention to detail, I think it could be realistic, because you could also see how the improvement he's made with multiple guys on that defensive line, especially on the edge position, and looking specifically at Ja Joyner and even Danny Shergow, both of them putting up decent sack numbers, both of them putting up decent pressures, both of them looking good, even in a year where the defense somewhat struggled with consistency. So if they can get on that phone, if they can get a real open consideration, I think they could seal the deal. I think it could be a realistic possibility, and they could present an opportunity to pair Jaxon Howard with Anthony Smith long-term, which would be amazing. But then also getting a rotation this season of Anthony Smith, Ja Joyner, Danny Shergow, and Jaxon Howard, that could be a dangerous four-man rotation when it comes to the edge rushing position. So overall, I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, hoping we can make it happen and we can bring another Minnesota kid home who has top tier talent as well. So that's going to be something we'll keep an eye on and keep you posted about here at Locked On Golden Gophers as that second wave opens. I believe it opens on April 15th and it will go through April 30th. So things are going to go quick, and we'll have you with the latest and greatest here at Locked On Golden Gophers. So don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss that daily content. Now, speaking of the transfer portal, we're going to talk about the men's basketball team and a couple more names to keep in mind as more commitment decisions are coming through. That's coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about the best ticketing app in my opinion, hands down, bar none, and it is none other than our friends over at Gametime. Now, Gametime is also now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and prices on Gametime actually go down the closer you get to the first pitch. So definitely take time to download the Gametime app and take advantage of their last minute deals, because they have killer deals on last minute tickets, all in prices and so much more. And you can save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it. And the app's free, so why don't you download it, take a look, see what their different features and offerings are. And when you see these killer deals that you're going to want to take advantage of, then you will thank me later. And right now you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime by downloading the app, creating an account, and then you can use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So not only do you get to take a panoramic view of your seat to see what it looks like to pick that seat before you buy it, but you also will get the all-in pricing so you don't have to worry about surprise fees and so much more. And on top of that, they have a lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So definitely, again, head on over to Gametime, download the app and create an account and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON college for $20 off. Terms apply. And download Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, we are wrapping this one up with some men's hoops talk. I want to talk about some names in the portal to keep an eye on. Now, first of all, we mentioned on a previous podcast last week that Andrew Morgan was a player who was visiting, coming from North Dakota State, from Waseca, Minnesota. He ended up committing with Nebraska. He said it was down to the wire between them and the Gophers. Ultimately, he goes with the Cornhuskers and Hoiberg over there as the coach. So lost out on that big man. Dane Danger, another guy from Minnesota. I don't know if we were really ever in the race or a real option, but he ended up committing to Memphis. So those are two big men options gone. I've had people ask, could Pharrell Payne come back? And honestly, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. I think that he is very much going to choose another option outside of Minnesota and the NIL opportunities that come along with it. So those are three different centers I do not think are going to be on this Minnesota roster. Actually, I'm fairly certain. But names to keep an eye on overall, two of them being center position players. One is Zed Key. He is more of a newer face into the portal. He comes from Ohio State. He was a senior. He has 1 year of eligibility left, I believe. And apparently he is prioritizing fit and opportunity over the money. So if that is true, Minnesota definitely has at least the opportunity, and I believe they could have the fit as well. Now, he would play more of that center role, but he is kind of undersized at the center. I believe he's 6'8", which is definitely smaller on the center size, but he brings some beef and some bulkiness to that center position, physicality, and he could have starter minutes from the jump and play alongside Dawson Garcia. And I think their games still could mesh and complement each other. Now, one thing you'd love about Zed Key is that he has played Big Ten ball. He's played for Ohio State. He's had some high-level play before. Prior to the injury, he was playing at an all-time high level, 13.4 points per game, 8.4 rebounds per game, while shooting 63% from the floor. Definitely, if you compare that next to Dawson Garcia, you're going to get a big man, crazy tandem down low, and then also players that can kind of stretch the floor and open it up for your point guard, who is an all-world facilitator. So having both of those big men could be awesome for point guard Elijah Hawkins. It sounds like Cam Christie should be on his way back to the Gophers. Maybe, fingers crossed. It sounds like Coach Ben Johnson is expecting to have 4 starters from last year returning, and that would be awesome. Now, we know for sure that we've seen the messages from Elijah Hawkins back, Mike Mitchell Jr. back, Dawson Garcia back, and I know the Gophers are pretty much working on a way to get Parker Fox the eligibility to come back as well. That'd be 4 key players. If you can get Cam Christie, it's 5. We know Caden Betts is back as well. That's 6 players right there. And then you turn into a Zed Key who could start for the Gophers. That gets you a 6th player. You're starting 5, I believe 6, 7 players. We're going off the cuff here. But anyways, he's strong. He's undersized a little bit, but he would bring valuable experience and veteran play. Plus, he could pair well next to Dawson. So he's a name that intrigues me a lot. Jamie Kaiser Jr., a freshman last year. He'd be a true sophomore next year. Maryland is the school he is transferring out of. Now, he has 3 years of eligibility left on the table, and that's huge because the Gophers will be losing Dawson Garcia, Elijah Hawkins, Mike Mitchell Jr., potentially Parker Fox if he's back, potentially Cam Christie if he's back, and that's 5 players you're going to lose on top of potentially having some open scholarships. If you bring in a Zed Key, he would be a player you lose right away. That's 6. So you need some players that can help build your core for the future. It can't just be Isaac Asuma and Grayson Grove and Caden Betts. That's 3 players. But if you could add a Jamie Kaiser in the background who gets to work with the team and work with that veteran presence for a whole year, maybe get some spot minutes and find his way into the rotation, and then he can step up into a very large role for his junior year, that could be massive for the Gophers long term. Now, last year he played in 33 games, started 5 of them. Obviously, like I said, played in the Big Ten with Maryland. And he adds a lot of defensive presence and a lot to that defensive end. His plus minus on the defensive end was very nice, but he really struggled on the floor offensively. And so that's why I say you maybe warm him up to it. Now, he struggled to shoot 26% from the floor, both from the floor and the 3-point line, and that's not very good at all. So hopefully you can get him some better opportunities and some more confidence in dropping when it comes to shooting the basketball. But he could be a player, like I said, that learns and grows in the program next year and then really takes on a major role in 2025. Now, the last name I want to bring up is Keenan Fitzmaurice from Stony Brook. He is a center, great size, 7 foot overall. I believe he could have 2 years of eligibility left because I believe he used a med red 1 year, and then he would have the opportunity of the COVID year if he wants. So I think he has 2 years of eligibility left, but we all know that COVID kind of messed us all up in that department, so I could be wrong there. Now, on top of that, he could be a wonderful rotational big behind someone like a Zed Key. That would be phenomenal if you had Zed Key and Dawson working as your starters, and then all of a sudden you get a Keenan Fitzmaurice in there as a rotational big who can bring you defensive presence on the front rim protection and maybe some rebounding. That could be nice. He did start at Stanford early in his career, but didn't get much opportunity there. Goes to Stony Brook and gets some playtime opportunity. Now, last year he averaged almost 11 points a game and 1.1 blocks per game. Both of those would be welcomed here with Minnesota, and he brings some real height to the team. And if there are 2 years of eligibility, again, it helps you build on a core beyond next season. So those are some names to keep in mind for Gophers basketball, and we'll keep you posted here on what we hear for other names to keep in mind, other names who are visiting and what have you. This should be your go-to spot for daily Gophers content. I hope you're hitting subscribe. I hope you're telling others about the channel so we can get this thing building the right way. Now, I'm going to be at Gophers practice tomorrow afternoon, so I'll keep you posted on some updates of what I'm seeing at that live practice, some of the maybe rotation changes we've seen since that first practice, and so much more here at Locked On Golden Gophers. So be sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss any future Gophers videos, and I will see you then. Row the boat, Sky Umago Gophers, and don't forget to subscribe.